Um, and I am Maud Narol. I am co-chair for Action and Advocacy, board member, State League of Women Voters of Colorado. Welcoming all of you. Our real hostess is just here. Fabulous. Um, so Kathy Ebersberger, are you?
I'm ready.
You are ready.
Um,
Wonderful. I am a co-host. Beth is going to be on the phone for a little bit.
okay.
Um,
Can I
I'm
share my screen?
I'm going to make you a co-host as well. I believe I can do that.
I think she can share her screen without that, but I'll take
Okay.
care.
Okay.
All right.
Should I go
Thanks very
dark?
much. And I apologize to everybody for being late. I had computer problems and had to go to a different place in my house. Okay, today's meeting is of the J.E.D.I committee. And one thing I would like everybody to do, if you don't mind, is could you please enter in the chat what area of J.E.D.I, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, you're interested in? I know a lot of people are probably interested in immigration, but J.E.D.I encompasses so much more. So if you're interested in any of these areas, could you please enter that on the chat? And if you would be interested in advocacy efforts, could you please enter that as well? That'll help me in preparing future programs. We're going to talk about two things today. The first is going to be LGBT threats to the LGBTQ community, especially trans people, as well as the threat of mass deportation and threats to the immigrant community. We have today Chris Freskis, who is the CEO and publisher of El Seminario, which is a media publication. Since 1989, the weekly issue El Seminario has built a solid reputation on committed relationships, garnering trust and nurturing a foundation for integrity within our communities. The biggest bi-weekly news content offers the readers printed and digital options featuring national and international news with a community focus on a national level. This is a bilingual publication. It shares diverse news and current events, and our media outlets provide an opportunity for 55 million Latinos in the country to participate and engage in issues facing our country. For decades, the weekly issue of El Seminario has fulfilled a unique niche, offering news and opportunities in two languages, culminating in a unified voice and progressive efforts in our communities. And Chris is a really good partner of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. He's a Latino, and his family has been in the United States for 5 or 6 generations. So he has a really broad base of knowledge of the immigrant community. But before we get to Chris, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about the threats facing the hold on a second. The threats facing the trans community. And I'd like to start with our purpose in the J.E.D.I task force. I'd like to read it. The league, oh, I meant to share that, but hold on. Sorry about that. Well, I'll just read it. The League is committed to fostering, cultivating, and preserving a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging for all people. The League is an organization that respects and values the richness of our community and our members. The collective sum of our individual differences and life experiences represents not only our culture, but our reputation and the organization's mission and achievements as well. So I'd like people, even if you just came here because of the immigration, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where the trans community is at this very moment. We know that there remain marginalized communities in the United States, communities that law and society haven't always treated equally. Typically, these are based on race, sex, gender, religion, disability, or even economic disadvantage. Project 2025 has voiced the goal of removing the hard-fought protections of DEI remedies that were put in place to protect these communities. There's now a wave of backlash against DEI policies, and at least 5 major corporations have reduced or eliminated their DEI protections for their employees. Further this week, the University of Michigan announced that they were going to review their DEI policy. 2 of the groups most at risk today are LGBTQ people, especially trans people, and immigrants, and that's what our program is about today. This week, the United States Supreme Court heard arguments in U.S. v. Scrimeti. The case concerned a Tennessee law that banned gender-affirming medical care for trans minors, including puberty blockers, hormone treatments, and surgery for gender dysphoria. However, the law does not categorically prohibit these treatments. It only prohibits them for trans youth. If a person is trying to arrest early puberty, those treatments are available. The question presented in the case was whether the Equal Protection Clause was violated by the Tennessee statute, and there are similar statutes in 26 states. Some characteristics of people are so important that the government needs a very, very good reason to treat people differently. Sex is one of those areas. The traditional interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause holds that if a law discriminates based on sex, a government needs a very, very, very good reason to do so. Here the question was whether that increased scrutiny applied to the trans youth. The justices during the oral argument seemed prepared to allow lawmakers more leeway when they are discriminating against sex if the discrimination is against trans youth on a medical issue. The Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade, showed that the current court is willing to include language beyond the narrow scope of the issue presented. The question remains whether the Scrimeti decision, when it comes down in June, will be limited to whether this heightened scrutiny applies, or would it contain language that can be read to permit discrimination against trans youth. With the Scrimeti case, which is the first case to come before the United States Supreme Court on whether trans rights are protected under the United States Constitution. With this case, trans rights are poised on a precipice, and it is a slippery slope. Although trans rights in the employment area are protected by civil rights laws, if the Supreme Court refuses to acknowledge that discrimination against trans people is discrimination based on sex, it will encourage society to treat trans people as other. It will give people permission to fashion pretextual reasons to discriminate against trans people. For instance, if you want to fire somebody, you'll just come up with a reason that doesn't say because they're trans, you'll say because they wear blue shoes or something. And this is going to impact trans people's jobs, benefits, housing, education, and their very families. It could impact whether they have the right to adopt or things like that. The rhetoric used against LGBT people, particularly trans people, has fanned a fury of anti-trans legislation. In 2024, there were 30 anti-trans initiatives proposed in Colorado. These went from banning gender-affirming care to minors, banning trans girls from school sports, enshrining parental rights, forcing teachers to out LGBTQ youth, decreasing access to youth health care, and censoring teachers and school personnel. The new anti-trans proposals reflect an increasing hostility to the trans community that all too often turns to hatred and subtle indirect discrimination. The Supreme Court will decide if trans youth can be denied appropriate medical care and how far that goes. Can trans adults be denied medical care? Can trans people be denied any other right? What does it say to us as a people if it's okay under the law to discriminate against people based merely on what sex they are? The policies of the new administration are unpredictable, but we know that they will attack DEI, trans people, and immigrants. We don't know exactly what they will do or how they will proceed, but we do know that these policies rely on hatred against marginalized people to sustain the political will to support them. If one group is eliminated, such as trans, then they'll go to another group, such as LGBTQ people. That is why J.E.D.I awareness is critical in the coming days. While many of you are here today to discuss immigration, J.E.D.I groups, especially trans people, are in the line of fire. We cannot lose sight of the attacks on the other marginalized people as we fight against mass deportation. Women who were born in 1848, when the Declaration of Sentiments was written, were 72 in 1920, when women got the right to vote. Many more women struggled their entire adult life for the right to vote, but did not live to see the 19th Amendment ratified. We are their descendants. Hold on. Women have been fighting for 176 years when the Declaration of Sentiments was signed. The League has been fighting for 104 years, and we will continue to fight. Today, women have a seat at the table. In 2024, there were 25 women senators, 127 women representatives, and 4 women delegates. So what can we do? How can we fight? And this will apply in the immigration context as well, because even though we know that they're going to do mass deportations, we don't know how it's going to play out. And it's practically impossible to plan a rebuttal if you don't know what you're fighting against. But we can do several things. First off, we can educate ourselves and keep informed. Be aware of the subtle discrimination you see. This next step is thanks to Anita Hill last night. Do the right thing. And that's going to be different for each one of us. Some of us will speak out. Some of us won't feel comfortable doing that. Some of us will write letters to our legislators. Some of us will educate others. But we need to do the best we can to do the right thing. The third thing is to meet people like you, because the stereotypes are not usually true. And we have to treat people as individuals and to learn that they are people just like us. The fourth is form coalitions, and that's what the League is trying to do right now. And that's why Chris is here. And the final one, and this is again from Anita Hill, build political empathy. And I think that's going to be really important because the more we understand what people's views are and understand why they feel that way, the more we're going to be able to find common ground. So I'll turn it over to Chris now to talk more about immigration. But I hope that you guys will remember the other J.E.D.I issues. And please keep that on your screen because it is going to go far and fast. And I think we need to prepare to address it. So thank you. Chris is here today, and I've asked him to address the question, what do we need to know about immigration?
Okay.
So Chris, would you like to take the stage, please?
Yes, Kathy, thank you for the introduction, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, especially to the League of Women Voters. We have had a long relationship. To my experience, it's been well over 10 years, and recently with a lot of what I want to say, some very aggressive leadership here in the last 2-3 years. It has brought us tremendously closer on the issues. And I just want to share a little bit about our organization to give you some I guess, background. El Seminario was founded in 1989, and today it is what we call a media group. And the reason we call it a group is, as you know, media has changed over the years tremendously. It continues to evolve. And so we knew we had to stay ahead of the curve, especially when the first attack came onto our democracy in 2016. We saw what happened there. And so we started to take a very close look and put resources together and increase our partnership as we have with League of Women Voters. So today we are not only doing a weekly edition, we also have our online sites, and we have various platforms, which we call our new broadcasting arm. And we'll be sharing more information after the first of the year now that it comes to completion. But our goal was and is to know that we were going to be faced with this again, and we wanted to be prepared for it. Now, we remain as an independent media, and that is by choice, because we feel that everybody needs to have a voice. It cannot be controlled by corporate America. It cannot be controlled by politicians. It's controlled by our society, by our community, and by these partnerships. So I have been in this chair since its beginning, and I have seen it evolve tremendously over the years. So I will start on what we are doing about immigration. We, first of all, started to watch the elections from January of this year and keeping an eye on things. And it was right about August, September when we saw where the needle was going. And so we started to get ourselves positioned quickly. We are looking at a situation right now with immigration that it's not just going to affect the immigrants, which we like to call our new neighbors. It's going to affect even my generation and the generations behind and the generations in front. My generation, as I mentioned, even my father, my grandfather, have experienced, Kathy, you hit it on the nail when you said about hate, because that's what drives this type of scenario at this time. It is affecting all generations, not just Latinos. It will be affecting Asians, Blacks, and so forth. So we have put a microscope on this. And today, as I'm looking at my notes, is that I have counted well over close to 16 to 18 different avenues that Trump is going to try. And one that is probably the most feared right now is for him to do an executive order to prevent asylum offices from granting any type of asylum applications. Also, I want to address the fact about this rhetoric of immigrants that they've come into this country, they're criminals, they're drug users, they're rapists. That is totally inaccurate, completely inaccurate. Anybody can go and look up the statistics and find out that crime is not done by the immigrants. Sorry to say, it is done by US citizens. And this is something that we need to be focused on with regards to gun laws and other situations that would help prevent those types of crimes. But and I will just say his name, but for Trump to be using that as a reason to close the borders is very, very inaccurate. The thing that we have to look at is that it is definitely going to hurt families all across the board, not just the immigrants, but families that have been here for generations, because you will find them to be treated in a very harsh way. I have some very close friends that have also been in this country for years, that live in some parts of the state that are seeing hate signs, are being looked at in a different way, that are driving with flags of Trump. I've heard stories already about women being mistreated. So it's happening. And these types of relationships are going to be very important, that we continue to work together, but also connect with other networks and especially our audiences to inform them and keep them up to date. One other area I want to touch on is the economy, because it is going to affect the economy a great deal. If he attempts to do what he's mentioned about the roundup, you're going to have many people that are not going to go to work. They're going to be terrified to show up to work. They're going to be afraid to go to school. They're going to be afraid to even go out and do shopping of any sort. They will be afraid to go to churches. It's going to cripple our economy, because as we know, it is the working class is priority have been the communities, the minority communities.
Chris,
And
can I interrupt you just for a second? Could you turn
yes,
your video on, please? Do you mind?
not at all. 1 second.
Thanks.
All right.
There you go.
My apologies.
No problem.
Is the communities, the workforce, and we've all seen this, is that they are primarily the minority communities that are behind the service industries. And those range from construction to food service, restaurants, nursing, other services such as could be electrical and plumbing. It's going to affect all of those industries. We're also seeing that this is going to affect the borders in a way that people will not be able to visit families. There will no longer be, I think the visas are also going to be pretty much almost impossible to get at some point. But I want to stay on the topic of what it's going to do to the families. We have already where children are going to be afraid to go to school. Kathy, you touched on the area of the LGBT community. And we have been working very close with DPS, Denver Public Schools, to see what their response is going to be to much of this. And they're like us, they're on board. They are going to stand up for the immigrants and for the LGBT community. So I want to share with you what has recently come across my desk, and that is the DACA students. If Trump is able to, right now, as you know, the DACA is held up right now by the Fifth Circuit Court. And once he takes office, it is his plan to go ahead and to basically dismiss that. And if he does, then the DACA students will not be protected. I have been speaking to some of the universities already to get their take on this. I'm working very close with Regis, the University of Greeley out north, also the one in New Mexico, and working with MSU and CU Denver to see what we can do to assist them. In my notes, I have that you were wondering about a project we're calling Immigration Updates. we have put together a team here that is going to be focused purely on immigration updates. I spoke to our team leader. Her name is Karen. She's helping to organize that whole team. And that is going to be positioned to do live remotes when we're seeing something going on. As long as you're connected to El Seminario, you will be aware of that it's actually happening now. You'll be able to see the video. Second is coming what we call our briefs. Once we get information in from various offices and we're able to confirm the information, make sure that it is accurate and it is a reliable source. We are a bilingual product, so we will shoot it to the Spanish side of our team here. They will quickly edit, and then that will be available to everyone that's connected with us again. You should have something like that to you within a couple hours. That information will be put out, as I mentioned, instant. We are creating our podcast series. We're rebooting those. Right now, we did a 180 to focus on immigration and to speak to more to the community. So the podcast series will be a number of issues on immigration, about what to do about it, how to work around it, contact other organizations that we're working with. The last that we will be doing is what we call our own talk show, and we've been working on that as well. Hopefully that will be available and running by, my notes are telling me, by January or early February. This is where we'll bring in, like I heard Attorney General is possibly on the line, but we will be having conversations with various offices. The idea is going to make sure that we're bringing hope to everybody, but it's not just hope, that there is action that is going to be taken. And I want people to be able to reach out to us. We will put we've already got a few emails intact. One is democracy@elseminario.net.us. And then there's another one, info@elseminario.us. Both of these are live, and you can reach out to us, as well as to my office. If you need to reach me, I can be reached at publisher@elseminario. So we're going to make sure that we are doing everything as your advertisement for this program says, keeping our people safe. And that's our goal. I'm open for any questions anyone might have. If I may say then, the other areas we're focusing on is also the TPS, the temporary protective status. Because if that's overturned as well, then a lot of people will be immediately at the will of ICE or any other officers that will come out and detain and arrest them. The scary part of that is, in order to get a temporary protective status, is you have to have all your information over to our government, which will be on file. So it'll make them for a quick extraction if that takes place. And to my understanding, we're looking at probably over 850,000 people. I'm sure that I'm not sure of the accurate numbers here, but it's a large amount. You've probably heard some of the states that are part of this whole new movement with this new administration that are willing to give up acres and acres of their land for detention centers all across the country. And so they're planning to get assistance, financial assistance from the new administration to build these detention centers. We've seen already programs that are trying to come into place now to not only gain or gather the so-called, as they're calling them, illegals here, which is a word that it just gets me very angry when they use that word. But you are having transportation companies already in line to get to handle this type of infrastructure. So as I said, I will try to answer any questions that some of you might have. And I'll turn it over to you, Kathy.
Kathy, you're muted.
Amy, do you have a question? You're on mute.
I do. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, I haven't heard quite as much in the news about Aurora being ground zero or whatever for this big thing. Should we, or could we read any kind of optimism into that as far as our state goes? I know that it still doesn't solve the problem, but yeah, I don't know whether I'm the only one who kind of has heard more about like Texas and Arizona or whatever.
Sure. Well, let me, next week, I think it's on a Friday, I will be meeting with the new chief of police there. Conversations has been that he is not going to aid any of the officers, such as ICE or any of those officers. Now, as far as the mayor there, we all know that he was he's still a Republican. Kaufman hasn't always been the ideal person we want. He said some statements early that he was not going to support any of these measures that Trump was putting forward. But we've heard that language conversations before. Our mayor, the mayor in Denver, Mike Johnston, he's doing I think, a very good job. In this week's edition, one of our columnists wrote an article against the Denver Post of what they wrote, stating that Johnston was somewhat in favor, and that isn't the truth. So you'll have to read the article, maybe perhaps from here. I'll send you, Kathy or Beth, the link, and you can forward it out to your following here, and you can read the article. But I would say at this point, be very skeptical. We've heard some things even from our governor that I'm very concerned about. I do not see that some of the comments he made were kind of questionable early in the process. So my job here as the publisher, I try to have an idea of what our so-called leaders are doing and try to read between the lines and be able to navigate through this. As I said, we've been here for 35 years. It has been a very, very interesting and educating 35 years. I know coming into this position, initially I thought maybe 5 at best would be to the demographics of the Latino community. I stopped counting when we got past 12. So there's a various amount of demographics of where the Latino come from, the Latino population. And what I have seen in my 35 years is a lack of understanding, and that is between all communities. We do not understand each other. There's been this impulse of immediate satisfaction to the issues, and which that isn't the way of life. If you want things to be done and to be done right and be done with an ethical way with morals, it takes time, and you have to learn about the people or the communities that you live with. So in the 35 years, I have seen that. And as I mentioned, we come from a variety of different countries. I think in my notes, Kathy, I might have shared with you, but for this stigma of immigrants are from Mexico, they're not all from Mexico. They're coming in from Colombia, from Venezuela, from El Salvador, from even and China, Peru. There's a variety of where they're coming. And something that was amazing that I found, some of them are coming in through the airports. So they're flying in. Now, those are the ones that I imagine they have the finances and the ways to do that. But when you see families crossing to try and get here for a simple reason, they're refugees. They're leaving their countries not because they want to leave their countries. They have to leave for the reasons of what the crime is happening there in their countries, and it's due to their government. That their government is not in place as ours has been and should remain. So they're coming here for a better life for their families and for their children to be able to have a future. And we have a tremendous amount of data happens. I've already been aware of that. A lot of these students will not go to school. They will just stop going to school. And these children are brilliant. I've spoken to a few of them over the years and applauded them for their progress and what they're doing. Some of them are wanting to be attorneys and doctors and scientists, and even one to be an astronaut, and the list just goes on. These are brilliant minds. They want to achieve the best for humanity, and we're closing those opportunities. So we do have to work together. And I just want you to know that my desk, my phone, I'm always open to conversations and to see how we can do that together.
Chris, can you talk about how we use the word immigrant, but that applies to people in so many different situations. Can you talk a little bit about some of that? For instance, we have economic migrants, refugees, they're like different. And some people are fleeing gang violence, some people are fleeing government violence. We have if you could talk a little bit about how broad that is, so that, I mean, you mentioned at one point that it includes people like you, who've been here for generations. But you could make distinctions based on, quote, legal and illegal. For instance, asylum people are legally in the country while they're waiting for their application. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think, and that's kind of a broad area for sure, because to me and to this institution here, and I'm sure it's to all of you, nobody as a human is illegal. I've always questioned the idea of how did we, our governments in this world, determine that what they own and don't own and what people can do and cannot do. When you go back to look at this country, for example, the Americas here, it was all about immigrants in the very beginning, if you want to call them immigrants, but they were not. They were here before many of us were born for centuries. So the people that are coming, for example, from Venezuela and from Colombia, those are economics that is pushing them from their country. The governments there have pretty much did not have their societies in focus. It was for the wealth of those who felt that they wanted to be in power. So you have governments right now that are working in that direction. So you have the people leaving their country to come here to find, again, a better way of life. Now, I've seen and heard stories about families coming here because of sex trafficking, where we would consider them as asylum seekers to have protection. Now, the stories have been where daughters and even boys have been put into sex trafficking. You have where parents have put into working camps, and that's how they control the families or control the economics in those countries. So there's a lot of variables of why people are coming here. As I mentioned, they don't want to leave their home. They have families there, their ancestors, their way of life. Many of the conversations we've had is that we do have a YouTube channel that you can go there and you can listen to the interviews we've already done with families, and they will have the discussions with you. Something I want to also share before I forget, though, Kathy, is when you have people coming in this country, it's very hard for them to get a work visa. And that's another thing that the incoming president is going to try and do away with completely, that you will not have a work visa. You cannot get one. But the people that are working here that are doing it without the work visas, all the taxes and everything that come out of their paychecks, they don't get a cent of that at the end of the year. They don't get any benefits from that whatsoever. That money stays with the government. And the last I saw, it was in the either the very, very high trillions or billions of dollars that they never see. So immigrants and illegals are two words that we don't like to use, and that's why we call them our new neighbors, because they are our neighbors. They come here with a purpose, and that is to enjoy the opportunities that we have, that many of us have forgotten what those opportunities and blessings that we have. So the word I want to mention to you is, you had asked what I prefer to be called, and I mentioned Latino. And the reason is because Hispanic does come from the España, from Spain, and the government back then, and that's why they picked up on it as far as Hispanic. But the Spaniards to the Latinos whether it be from Mexico or other countries, they're known as the conquerors back then, as the conquistadors. And they were people that were very, what would I say, aggressive in how they wanted their way of life, especially when they came to this country and with the Native Americans. So it wasn't a situation where for many decades that word Hispanic was not welcomed at all. So currently the proper is to be called a Latino. There are some that would like to be called a Chicano or Chicana, and those are different also. Those are mainly Native American that have a Spanish or Mexican blood in them as well. So that's more of towards the Native American. But even Native Americans want to be called by where they're from, their tribe. And that is coming back where we've been working a lot with Native Americans now across the country. We started that back in 2016. So we have a lot of diversity in this country. And, you know, we're all on the same page of just living a life of equality and equity. That's what the goals are. Can I answer anything else?
I think that a lot of people are really struggling with what can we do to help, and concrete ideas for what we can do to help. And we are in the process of trying to put together a list. And I know that a lot of this will depend on how things actually play out. I know that somebody put in the chat, there's a lot of good ideas in the chat, and some of you might be interested in friend, hold on, I'm hunting for it. The American Friends Service Committee is setting up an immigrant protection team for Aurora. And the contact information is in the chat from Gina McCarthy. So if you want to look at that, if you're interested in doing that. Other things, right now, I have gone through Project 2025 and listed all the things that they're proposing doing. And we're comparing those to our league position on immigration. And then we'll be able to formulate more concrete ideas of what we can do. Some of the things we have questions about that we forwarded to the National League of Women Voters. But there's other things like writing to your legislators and telling them your position on immigrants and the importance of immigrants to the community. You can write letters to the editor. And Gina has another thing that you can do. Put pressure on the Republicans in Congress. We're working to develop actions and talking points for the league members and the general public. What we just started getting educated on this whole process about 2 weeks ago. So I think the biggest thing that we can do right now is educate ourselves on what the law is and what might happen.
May I interrupt you there, Kathy? Sorry.
Yeah.
LWPCO is working in partnership with a large group of people, including the ACLU, which has already filed a lawsuit, and Mi Familia Vota, as well as Chris, of course, to develop actions and talking points around this issue. And we really hope to distribute that information before the holidays.
Yeah, we're just getting started. So we're contacting a lot of different groups. If anybody has ideas on immigrant groups we can contact, we're trying to be in contact with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. We've made contact with Lutheran Family Services. We're trying to get in contact with several organizations. If you have any ideas on what organization might be a good coalition partner, please enter that in the chat and we'll contact them and see if they fit within our goals and our principles. Does anybody else have a question? Could you put your hand up? Because it's hard for me to read the chat while I'm doing this.
Well, let me add one thing to your response there, Kathy and Beth. We have also put together a very long list, which is part of our community, our partners, which we started back in 2009, and that was after the Great Recession. And at that point, I think we worked with maybe 2 or 3 partners. Now we have a little over 40 partners, and they come from various professions. But a lot of them are on the front line with this whole thing with this new administration and what's going to happen with immigration, but the whole list of things, like you said, the Project 2025. So I will be sending you a list of all these organizations that have stepped up and said, what can we do? And they're ones that we have focused on as being what we call a trusted source. Working with them for years, that is something that you just can't become a partner by calling and say, I want to be a partner. There's got to be a history and an evidence before we actually discuss about them being a partner. So there are going to be trusted organizations that will have some very in-depth information as to what you're looking for. And they come from different professions, as I mentioned. For example, a couple would be like One Colorado. You mentioned ACLU is another one that will be there. The Sierra Club is another. Green Latinos is another. We have some organizations like Salute Family Health. So it's a variety of what their backgrounds are. And we will be putting that hopefully out before the holiday as well, before Christmas. I will make sure that some way all of you get a link to this information that we will be putting out quickly, and then just stay in touch with us and share with us information, what you see, what you feel that we need to be aware of.
And the other thing I could talk about a little bit is traditionally, Republicans have favored states' rights. And I think I've read something, and I thought this was an interesting perspective, is that now the Democrat states are going to have to stand up and advocate for states' rights so that as the federal laws come down against immigrants and other marginalized communities, we can say in our state, we protect them. In our state, we have rights for immigrants, for marginalized communities. So I think that when we start putting pressure on the government, we can support our state government to stand up and have a firewall against some of these draconian federal policies. But that's to come in the future. But I think the thing is right now, at first people were shocked about the results of the election. And now people are trying to educate themselves about what might come. And, hopefully we'll have more information before Christmas or certainly before the inauguration. Gina McCarthy, would you mind putting your contact information in the chat if you don't mind, so I can contact you? You seem to have a lot of good ideas.
If I may add to your comments there, Kathy, something we tried to do back in 2019 and 2020 when the Biden-Harris campaign was running is to give everybody an understanding of our government. And I think that's the biggest failure that we have, is that our society does not understand the rule of law, our government, as far as our Constitution goes, and how the judicial system works and how the branches of government work. And so we had started our own advocacy campaign back during that time to try and educate our communities and our society. They didn't take it serious, but I find that they are taking it quite serious now. You mentioned about our state being more democratic, but we're not shielded from everything, because what I focus on a lot is the economics. And, we could have a lot of federal dollars not come our way when we need it. And so we've got to link up with other states that feel the same thing of what Colorado is doing and has done. And I really believe that we have to start with our younger generations, and that is the kids that I find out that are in college now are very concerned about what is going on. I sit on a couple of boards with the universities, and I've had the opportunity to speak to the students firsthand, freshmen and sophomores, and they are very disturbed with this. Their futures are going to be very unsettled, and so we do have their ear. And I feel that they're the generation that is going to make the big difference. So we can't give up because they need us right now. They need us to lead the way and to hold our ground.
And I think some of you might be interested, if you're interested in civics education, the league is trying to get off the ground an civics education task force. So if anybody's interested in that, you can put your information in the chat and I'll pass it on to those people. We're starting to run out of time. Does anybody else have a question? If you put it in the chat and I haven't answered you, would you please just raise your hand if you can? I think what I'd like to leave everybody with, a lot of us are sort of in the older generation, and many of us fought against the Vietnam War or fought for civil rights. And we might have thought that that we've done our duty. But I think that we all need to remember that this is an important time, and this might be the reason that we're alive today, is to stand up for immigrants and for marginalized communities. So I think we're all seeking concrete ways we can help, and we're working on getting those together. So I don't want people to feel like there's nothing they can do. We can do something. So start educating yourself and be willing to stand up when the time is right. Phyllis, you have another question. You're on mute, Phyllis.
My question is in the chat. Could you read it?
Oh, let me see.
What I was wanting to know is when will we know specific locations where detention centers might be built and what contractors are in queue to try to get those orders to build those detention centers? Thank you.
Okay, right now there's a detention center in Aurora. It has about 1,200 people in it. It's run by a private detention company named GEO something. It's one of the publicly traded immigrant detention facility companies, and they run several others. As far as where they'll be built, I think, Chris, you might know this. There's a law that governments, state and local government in Colorado, can't contract with private prison companies. But as I understand it, that doesn't preclude private landowners from contracting with prison companies, and it doesn't preclude ICE from having a detention facility in Colorado. I was looking at standards for the living conditions for people in prison, in detention centers. I'm sorry, I keep confusing them with prisons, but they seem pretty similar. And one of the programs they have there, some of these people, the Project 2025 wants to keep people in detention during the entire period of their case. And an asylum case in the United States right now typically runs 4 to 5 years. And right now, people are being electronically monitored, but usually that period of monitoring ends about 14 months. But it looks to me like what Project 2025 proposes is that the electronic monitoring would continue for the entire period of their case. If you are in detention, there is a voluntary work program, and I think this sort of is a typical, it really gives you a window on how people are treated, because under the voluntary work program in a detention facility, there's a requirement that people in that program have to be paid at least $1 a day. $1 a day. So I think one good thing, or one thing that we might be able to monitor or certainly educate ourselves about is the conditions in detention facilities, because they are going to be used more and more. And the proposal is to use tents. So they're going to have temporary facilities with people housed in tents and massive amounts of people on electric monitoring.
And possible family separation again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can
And
you tell me that $1 a day, the value of that labor is going to go to who? The contractor who is running the detention center? When these people could be earning money, paying taxes, and paying into Social Security instead.
yeah, I'm sorry, but that's true.
Yeah, well, another thing that you mentioned in the very beginning, Kathy, was about the corporations that are already going to change their employment policies. Where we can start as well is to look into the corporations out there. One which is on that list is Walmart. And I think we have to be smart about where we start spending our dollars, because I think it's Wells Fargo, don't quote me on this yet, but last I checked, it's been some time, is Wells Fargo has investments in these detention centers. And there's other corporations that have the same. So that's where we have to start doing our research and looking into these organizations, because that's the way that we start to make a change, is by how we spend our dollars, where we spend our dollars, and who we are going to support going forward. Now, we have a couple of excellent representatives, and that is Congresswoman Diana DeGette and Congressman Jason Crow, which are really strong defenders of our new neighbors. So I always remember being with Diana DeGette when she went to those detention centers out in Aurora, and that she would actually go in there and visit these detention centers. And Jason Crow also, as I mentioned, is very in support of. Nagoose is another tremendous representative of ours also. So you're correct. Let's start to give them the support that they need. Let them know that we're here, and let's start building this connection, this relationship.
And I think Jason Crow just submitted a bill in the House to allow congressmen to have immediate access to detention facilities.
Yeah.
And that was a bipartisan bill that was submitted. I think that was last week or maybe this week. Does anybody else have a question that it was in the chat that I haven't noticed? Chris, do you have any final words?
Just don't give up hope on this, because when that is gone, then then there isn't a future. But just know that El Seminario has planted its feet very solid, and we're in this to, again, make sure that this never happens again in our history. As you said, Kathy, our generations I feel that we've been positioned for this, and to bring a little bit of history along with some experience, and move this needle in the right direction.
Okay, well, we have planned another meeting in 2 weeks on December 19th. If you're interested in immigration, it'll only touch on immigration, and we'll have more information then. And also, if anybody is interested in other J.E.D.I issues, would you please put your information in the chat so we can make sure you hear about it? And at the beginning of January, you can look at the league calendar. We're going to have a J.E.D.I meeting on anti-Chinese racism in Colorado. Colorado had a very vibrant Chinatown at one time, but it was demolished during an anti-Chinese riot. And that's why Denver doesn't have a Chinatown. And then during COVID, there was a lot of anti-Chinese rhetoric. So we'll be discussing that in January. There'll be more meetings on immigration because this is a fast-moving topic. So please keep your eye out for our meetings. And I'll leave the chat open for a while so that people can copy it. And if anybody has any other comments, go ahead and enter that. So thank you, Chris. This has been really informative. I think you've got us all fired up wanting to do something. And Beth has opened up communications with a group of people with ACLU and Mi Familia Vota. And we're working on getting a more concrete plan, but you'll have to bear with us just a little while. And Jean McCaffey has a lot of good suggestions in the chat if anybody wants to read them. So I'll end this meeting now. So thank you.
Thank you, and look forward to the next meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Have a good night.
You too.